Hi, my name is Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about high-leverage teaching practices for students with language impairments. Students with language impairments face unique challenges when it comes to engaging with academic content. Because of this, effective instructional strategies are really important for their academic success in the future. High-leverage teaching practices can be used with students with language impairments to enhance students' learning experiences and academic success. Language impairments are really common in the United States, with about 1 in 14 children having a language disorder. Language impairments are defined by IDEA as a communication disorder such as stuttering, impaired articulation, a language impairment, or a voice impairment that adversely affects a child's educational performance. There's a couple types of language impairments. There's 3 big ones I'm going to talk about. The first one is speech sound disorders. So this is when a child struggles with the formation and production of sounds and voice quality and fluency. So an example of this would be like stuttering. Receptive language disorders deal with trouble receiving or understanding language. So an example of this would be a child struggling with directions or having confusion in a conversation. This is just because these kids don't understand what you're saying. They don't know what these words mean. Lastly, expressive language disorder deals with trouble producing language. So an example of this would be a child with a really limited vocabulary that has trouble expressing themselves in conversations. High-leverage teaching practices are really foundational to effective teaching. They help aid in a child's social and emotional development and well-being. They also help manage behavior, and it really aligns and supports ideas, legislation for disabled or children with disabilities. High-leverage teaching practices are especially beneficial for students with disabilities because they allow teachers to meet the students where they are and build upon that foundation. The first high-leverage practice that I'll be talking about today is collaborating with professionals to increase student success. So pretty much what that means is professionals must be able to collaborate and communicate effectively so instruction can be properly tailored to a child's needs. Collaboration is really important for designing a wide range of material and instruction and services for a lot of different students. This high-leverage practice applies to students with language impairments because most students with language impairments are in the general education classroom about 80% of the time. So that's most of their day. So it would make sense that teachers and speech language pathologists work together so they can collaborate and meet the needs of the student within the classroom, because they're going to spend most of their day in there. An example of this high-leverage practice working in a classroom is a professional offering push-in services. A push-in service is where a professional goes into the classroom and helps the student with daily activities or lesson plan or lessons. And this is a lot more beneficial than push-out services, because when that occurs, professionals have to pull kids out of class and they're missing out on time with their peers and discussions and things like that. So an example of this in an elementary grade class could be a teacher reading a book out loud. A professional could help this student with language impairments sound out and pronounce words in the classroom setting. So this way, the child can still engage with their classmates and help build connections. And they also get to be a part of the discussion. Another high-leverage practice that can be used to help students with language impairments is providing positive and constructive feedback. Feedback is really a key tool when it comes to academic success, and is most effective when it's used after teaching a lesson. For feedback to be effective, it must be relevant to the student's learning goals or the class's learning goals. It must be constructive, it must be given in a timely manner, and it also must be respectful. Constructive feedback is really important also because it helps students understand where their strengths lie and where they need to improve. This high-leverage practice applies to students with language impairments because feedback allows the teacher to let the student know where they need to improve, where their strengths lie, and it helps motivate the student to self-reflect on their learning. An example of this being implemented in the classroom could be through recasting. So recasting is pretty much when a teacher takes what a student says and rewords it so its syntax and grammar is correct. So if a teacher is teaching a lesson about plants, like photosynthesis or something, and one of the students blurts out and says, I go to the garden and seen a bee. Teacher could take that comment and say, wow, you went to the garden and saw some bees on a plant? This is feedback in, I guess, like a stealthy way. You're not outwardly saying like, oh, you did this wrong, here's where you need to fix it, but you're taking what the child said and recasting it to reflect what they said in a correct, in a way in which the grammar is correct. You can also expand on what the student said to give them more vocabulary or more complex sentence structures to work with or to be knowledgeable of. The next high-leverage practice that I will be talking about is explicit instruction. Explicit instruction is when the teacher makes very clear to the students how to approach a skill and gives detailed examples and non-examples. Teachers can also break down learning to segments and provide examples during the lesson and give students feedback immediately and think out loud. This is really important because you have to remember at the end of the day you're teaching children. They don't know everything that we do, so like expressing how you're thinking about going about a problem is really important, as it can show them your train of thought. It breaks it down a little bit easier. Explicit instruction can apply to students with language impairments because it can be applied to those who struggle with things like vocabulary. An example of this an example of explicit instruction working in the classroom could be the teacher structuring a discussion in the class around word meanings. So it could look like the class figuring out what prefixes, suffixes, and root words mean. So when the student is reading a passage or something on their own, they can sound those words out and figure out how to pronounce those correctly. And it also gives them the skills to, work on that in the future. Another practice that can be used when teaching students with language impairments is identifying and prioritizing long-term and short-term goals. So this means the teacher must analyze data from the student, so like test scores, IEP plans, benchmarks, the student's prior knowledge, things like that. And based on all this data, teachers can strategically emphasize what's most important for these students to learn and create goals that align with that. So this applies to students with language impairments because it's really good for them to have structure and direction when it comes to education. And an example of this in the classroom could be a student having a long-term goal to grow their vocabulary by, let's say, 100 words by the end of the year. The teacher could set a short-term goal, so the student has to learn 5 new vocabulary words a week. So both of these goals or the short-term goal is working towards the long-term goal to learn 100 vocabulary words by the end of the school year. Both of these goals are time-oriented, they can be measured, and they're very attainable. The last high-leverage practice that I'll be talking about today is the use of assistive and instructional technologies within the classroom. Assistive technologies are software or equipment that is used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of students with disabilities. Assistive technology can be used with students with language impairments because it offers an alternative to spoken communication. An example of this working in the classroom is the augmentative and alternative communication boards, or AAC boards. An AAC board uses lots of colors and symbols to symbolize words and phrases. So an AAC board could be used during literary instruction. For example, if a teacher was asking a student opinions on a reading, a student who struggles with language production can use the AAC board to communicate and be a part of the discussion. The AAC board can also act as a way for students to input new vocabulary words and use them in their writings in the future. So in conclusion, high leverage practices are extremely important in effective teaching, especially with students with disabilities. Collaborating with professionals, providing feedback, setting goals, explicit instruction, and utilizing assistive technology are just some of the strategies that teachers can utilize when teaching students with language impairments. These tools help ensure that instructional time is accessible and impactful, and it helps create an environment where all students can thrive. Thank you.